It's the Up on Cyber podcast presented by Ariento. Security and compliance start here. Ariento is a leading B2B cybersecurity, information technology, and compliance service provider, and the #1 combined CMMC managed service provider and authorized C3PAO. From consulting to fully outsourced services and more, Ariento gives business owners and executives one less thing to worry about in today's interconnected digital world. This is the Up on Cyber podcast. Today is Friday, December 15th, 2023. And today we're joined by Wes Gavins, VP and Head of Cybersecurity for LA28, the Los Angeles Olympic Games. Wes has 30 years of experience with cybersecurity systems engineering, business analysis, project management, and risk management in the telecom, aerospace, defense, and commercial industries. As LA28 VP and Head of Cybersecurity, Wes provides strategic direction for the security of all corporate and Olympic Paralympic Games technology areas, including applications, telecommunications, and facilities. He serves as LA28 authority on security architecture, selects solutions to enhance security controls, conducts risk assessments for enterprise processes, and makes major security risk decisions. Wes comes to LA28 from the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, where he was the Chief Information Security Officer. And it doesn't say, but Wes and I go way back, and I appreciate him being on. But Wes was a Marine before any of this, and personally a friend, and is also on our board. So Wes, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Kind of jump right in. As I mentioned in your bio, you were the CISO for NASA JPL prior to joining LA28. How would you compare ultimately worrying about the security of deep space missions to the security of what is the largest sporting event in the world outside of the FIFA World Cup?
Well, it's interesting because JPL used to host or still hosts global events, right? So I'm used to working with our local, state, and federal authorities to assess our systems and to help manage the cybersecurity architecture and spectrum for global events. So in that case, it's similar. I guess where it's different is the fact that we're going to have 205 nations all participating. We're going to have 15,000 plus athletes. We're going to have 30,000 media all show up and converge for a 6-week period. So in that case, it's different. It's at JPL, if there's a problem like they had last year with the Psyche launch, you can just shift it for 6 months, or you can shift it to the next year. For these Olympics, it's an immovable object. The only Olympics that's ever been shifted was the Tokyo Olympics, and that's because of COVID, right? And that shifted 1 year. So that was unprecedented. And so for us, it's an immovable object.
As if a CISO, I read all the stuff on burnout in the cybersecurity industry, and right, as if a CISO or a head of cybersecurity doesn't have enough stress put that deadline on you. So I don't envy you, but So what exactly are you as the host committee? I think one of the questions I had when knowing you and you taking this role. What's the difference in kind of what exactly are you, the host committee, responsible for versus what is the International Olympic Committee responsible for? And then you mentioned kind of the 200 plus countries. How do the nation states, and I assume they all have their own cybersecurity postures or requirements or demands, how do they fit into that puzzle?
Okay, so first thing I want to just correct and say that we're hosting the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Okay, so this is the first time that we're going to that Los Angeles is going to host the Paralympic Games. We're going to have about 11,500 Olympians and about 4,500 Paralympians who are going to be joining us. Now, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, is the owner of the Olympic brand, the Olympic properties. What they do is they give out franchises, basically, to host these games. So Los Angeles has a franchise basically to host the 2028 version of the IOC's Olympic Games. Okay, so that's kind of the distinction. We sign a host city contract, and there's specific requirements that we have to meet related to all aspects of branding, ticketing, telecommunications, cybersecurity, etc. There are certain requirements, but then we do have some wiggle room because we are the United States, right? And this is Los Angeles, and we have our every nation has their own rules that you have to be in compliance with. So we work together collaboratively. If there's some concerns or changes based off of local laws or best practices, then that's a negotiation with them. Now, where the other communities come in, the other countries, every country has their own national organizing committee, right? And then within those national organizing committees, they have, there's also international federations for different sports. Like FIFA is the international federation for, soccer, etc. So we have to then work with those organizations. Those organizations are responsible for their sport. They're responsible for what all the prerequisites to become an Olympian. Okay, where our responsibility is to set the stage, right? To have all the facilities in place, accommodations, to make it a fun event for everyone who shows up for this games, and a secure and safe event. Because if you look through history, we've had lots of incidents. Either they're cybersecurity incidents, or you go back to what to physical incidents where terrorists attacked Israeli Olympians. So it's all aspects of physical and cybersecurity and everything in between that we have to deal with.
Yeah. Along those lines, what keeps you up at night in this role?
Right now, it's just trying to figure out what I don't know, and what I mean by that is, I came into this job to say that, and my perspective is, this is a nation state protection activity, right? Because at JPL, I remember, we were constantly being attacked, and this is going to be JPL on steroids. They sometimes can, they say it's like 7 Super Bowls a day for the Olympics, right? Well, the Olympic Games are a 2-week period, so that's 7 Super Bowls a day for 2 weeks. There's a 2-week lull when we transition to the Paralympic Games, and then it kind of goes down to about 2 or 3 Super Bowls a day for 2 more weeks. You see, so so what keeps me up at night is just making sure my team, I'm on the technology team, and we're responsible for, endpoint protection for our corporate environment and for the games applications and systems that are going to be brought on board, plus the protection of the athletes, dignitaries, etc. So I got to make sure I understand what are all the current processes and procedures from a federal, state, and local perspective. What do the law enforcement agencies do today for these large-scale mega events? How can we leverage that? We have to do assessments of all of these different venues. We're going to have 70 venues, 31 of which are going to be competition venues. So, what's their current posture? What's their current infrastructure? What do we have to bring and overlay on top of their infrastructure? Can we leverage their infrastructure? So, and all of that's a negotiation. The legal negotiation has to be signed on the venue by venue perspective. So for me, I see that that's a big hill that we have to climb in 2024. And we got to get a lot of this done, because at the end of the Paris Olympics next year, when they hand the torch to us, we're front and center. The spotlight comes on us, right? So I got to make sure that we have the foundation of our cybersecurity protections in place prior to the spotlight, and then mature it for the next 4 years after that.
Yeah, you mentioned it's something that struck me in a previous conversation we had, that right now, and I mean, this was a few months ago, so maybe not exactly the case anymore, but right now you guys are essentially a small business with the resources of a small business, the team the size of a small business, that within a year is going to quickly scale to be a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that's like the size of a Fortune 500, and then in 4 years cease to exist completely, and shut down and be out of business.
Well, it's more like we're going to ramp up in big time in 27 going into 28. So right now we're small. We are a small business, but I'm thinking of this as it's already a multi-billion-dollar corporation, with a nation state protection mandate, right? So that's how I'm addressing this now. But yeah, we're starting small. We're probably double in size by next year. We're less than 200 now, but it's as we get closer to the games, that's when we're going to ramp up significantly. And I got to make sure we have a training program in place for
Yeah.
all of our workforce, our contractors, the different role-based training for functional areas.
Yeah.
Then when our athletes come in, we got to make sure they understand how to protect themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot that goes into this. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, I mean, it's such a unique challenge, and you mentioned so training is one of the things you're focused on. I
Mhm.
guess, like philosophically, as you make decisions from a technology and security standpoint, as you know, with these very distinct and very different stages, like how do you look at this? I guess philosophically, and kind of, at each stage, what does success look like, and how are you measuring it?
Okay, so I'm coming up with an annual plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are
Mm-hmm.
specific milestones that I set in terms of what are our security tools, what are the controls that have to be in place, what are the organizations that we have to interface with,
Mm-hmm.
what are the asks I need from our federal agencies. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be working a lot with DHS CISA, for example. I'm going to be working a lot with a local law enforcement and our local cybersecurity functional leads from the counties and the cities. This
Mm-hmm.
this the games are going to go across what I call 12 law enforcement districts,
Mm-hmm.
jurisdictions, right? And I got to be able to work with each of the CISOs in those areas. Then all the CISOs for things like the ports and as well as the cities and counties. So for me, this in the next year is a lot of relationship building and a lot of and going to them and saying, I'm going to need your help.
Yeah.
So and here's our plan, and here's where I think you fit in, and work with them to make sure they understand, so that they have what's in place for their city
Mm-hmm.
to protect their own city and their own constituents.
Kind of along those lines with the multiple stakeholders, you were one of the ones at NASA JPL and your previous life. You've worked a lot with the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
and you were the kind of the first one that we were doing NIST 800-171 for how many years that had been out, and then CMMC kind of came along with this
Mm-hmm.
Inspector General scathing report of the defense industrial base. I'm curious from in the compliance world, different from security, it's a lot about frameworks. And you mention all these stakeholders, NIST, ISO,
Mm-hmm.
RMF, like
Yeah.
how are
Privacy,
you?
all the
Yeah,
privacy
privacy.
controls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. How are you approaching this, or how are you thinking about this from a, we live in the world of CMMC where now there's going to be an audit, right? The federal government's going to say, hey, to do business with us, you got to get it audited by an independent third party. I imagine that compliance challenge is not small for you. And how are you thinking about it from all the different stakeholders, not even including the nation states? And
Well, for me, it's I always kind of say sometimes I'm framework agnostic, right? Because
uh-huh.
a lot of these frameworks kind of flow off of each other. ISO
Mm-hmm.
27001 and 2, and everything kind of flows together. You can map them all together. CMMC is a good framework, and I'm glad that it's finally in place, and it can be used to help a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses in particular
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do business with the federal government. From my perspective, I'm looking at all different frameworks. Right, I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at the cybersecurity framework and some of the NIST 853 frameworks, 171. I'm looking at bringing in third-party auditors to help me from a commercial perspective, but also looking at third-party auditors from the federal perspective
Mm-hmm.
to come in and take a look. I want to attack this from all angles,
Yeah.
right? Using any framework that's available to make sure that we are looking at these controls from a 360-degree perspective,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we're shoring up our protections.
Yeah. That makes sense. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, I know in this world, people want a framework to win out, or there to be kind of consolidation at some point. And I just wonder. Obviously, the U.S., the federal government is a big customer with big buying power, but you've got the ISO in the different nation states, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of transitioning into, not to get into politics, but politics is obviously a part of the Olympics, whether we want it to be or not. And inside individual countries, let alone across nation states, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people don't always see eye to eye. How has that impacted you so far, or how do you anticipate it impacting you?
I generally don't deal with the politics of it in terms of doing my job. What I
Yeah.
do, is the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, owns these Olympics, right? And they're an international organization. So of course, most of their standards, their perspective is from the international perspective. It's from the European Union perspective. It's from, the perspective of all the different host nations. So that's why I said earlier, it's all about a negotiation, right? They have to understand. They've come out with their requirements, right? But they understand that every host nation has its geopolitical concerns that have to be taken into consideration on whether we use certain vendors, certain applications, or how do we integrate those certain vendors and applications so that we can make sure we're monitoring them for protection. Okay, all of that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I want to ask you, we do like a parent corner here thing, just kind of, and I know you've got two young girls, but before I go to that, like, I guess, how has the role been so far, and just in general, any closing or parting thoughts on it's just seems like such a unique position, and knowing you, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in what a cool role.
Well, it's a unique challenge for me. It's different, I've done lots of work in the federal space, and from my days working at Booz Allen, et cetera, I've done a lot of work with commercial and healthcare, et cetera. But sports entertainment is just a new model for me. However, one of the things I've done, like I've done in every engagement I've been a part of, I take my past experience. And that's the lens that I use to look through. So I know I may be coming at this from a different perspective than most, but that's the lens that I have, that I'm using my experience from DOD, from, working with the Air Force, from working with civil agencies like NASA, from working with multiple commercial and healthcare organizations. That's my lens. And I go and I say, okay, what are the requirements? What's been done in the past? I've done a lot of reading from past organizing committees. What they've done right, what they've done wrong, right? I've had the opportunity to go visit with my counterpart in Paris and had a great time working with him and his team and learning and seeing things that they're doing good, and hearing them tell me things they wish they could have done earlier or faster. Yeah. And I'm making sure I use that information to get us ahead. So I'm lucky. The U.S. LA was awarded these Olympics at the same time Paris was awarded the Paris Olympics in 2024. Usually, an organizing committee, we call it OCOGs. So an organizing committee for the Olympic Games. So OCOGs usually have 7 years to get ready for a game. Well, the United States had 11 years to get ready for this game. So that's huge for us. The fact that, so we could do things like hire me in my position 5 years in advance, hire our senior vice president of safety and security, meaning physical security, early. And we are now working together to make sure we understand the cyber physical impacts of any decision that we make, right? Because if you're going to put fences around all of downtown LA, for example, where are the cameras going to go? How are they going to get? What's the feed? What's the spectrum that's going to be needed for public safety communications? Do we have to bolster that? Do we have to how do we work with the FCC? So all of these things have to be worked together, and we have what's called a security cooperative, which is being used for that.
Is there one thing that's been the biggest challenge so far, or is it all just challenging?
The biggest challenge is we're just growing. We have to we got to get people in here, and we're hiring and we're learning together, and it's the big challenge is this is going to be what's called a national special security event. Right. So we have to go through that whole process to make sure that we're getting the right federal attention, to make sure that we're getting the right people, processes, and tools in place from a federal protection perspective to help us.
Yeah. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, and I appreciate you hanging on for kind of our parent corner, but have you given any thought to what will be next after this? Such a unique position, and kind of where you might go after, or
Not really, not really.
Okay.
I mean, even no, actually, it's 4 years away. That's an eternity, and so much is going to happen. And in between now and then, I kind of live in the moment, so to speak. Yes, I know that 4 years from now, or 4.5 years from now, I'll be without a job, just like a lot of people who are working on this. But I know I'll be set up for success. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sure you will be in high demand with this such unique experience. So.
Next Generation, or NextGen, is presented by CMMCMarketplace.org, your one-stop marketplace for all things CMMC. From FedRAMP vendors like Microsoft, Cisco, and Google, to C3PAOs, to readiness providers, to CMMC events and job boards, CMMC Marketplace connects and serves any and all CMMC stakeholders.
So we do this thing parent quarter, and knowing you're a great dad, and you have 2 young girls. I imagine this is an always on job, but it's also a once in a lifetime career opportunity. And so how do you balance this once in a lifetime career opportunity, with what, knowing your top priority of being a great dad?
Well, there's lots of conversation at home. I mean, even before I took this job, I had a good conversation with my wife to make sure she understood that I'm going to be busy. Now, right now, there's time, right? Where Paris is, the spotlight is on them. There's a Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina in Italy. So in 2026, but then the spotlight really comes on us. And, so I have the next couple of years, I've been saying, to kind of start ramping up. But, about 24 months plus before the games, that's when we're going to be, up and running. We're already going to be up and running 24 hours SOC. But now as our systems start coming online and running, that's the more and more time it's going to take for me. When I was in Paris, I really saw the workload, the 12-hour shifts, the folks that were always there, but they loved it. They loved being there. And that's the kind of environment I want to create for the team I'm building, is, we all understand we're in this together. And, but, like you said, but I'll make it home. I'll make sure my girls can, and that's why it's important for me to, as a part of, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy in LA28. So we can, and one of our mandates is impact, what kind of an impact we're going to leave, what kind of a legacy we're going to leave in LA. And I made sure that technology inclusion was a part of that, so that we can introduce these concepts, to the middle school and high schoolers across LA. And that plan is still taking shape, but that's going to be how I introduce this. And now make sure my daughters who are in middle school, that's what I'm thinking about, is how can they see what dad does? And so this is going to be a way I can do that.
Well, I imagine they are very proud of you, and how cool for them to be able to, when the games do finally get here, to experience it, I guess, a little bit from the inside. So,
it's interesting. When I first, I told them I was leaving JPL, they were sad, right? Because they loved going to their friends saying, my dad works for NASA. They love wearing their NASA shirts and hoodies, and I'm like, don't worry, in about 3 or 4 years, you'll realize what I'm doing is cool also, but I think they're starting to get it already.
It's all about the gear, right? It's all
right,
about
exactly. Give them some swag and they'll be on my side.
Yeah. I think they won't be disappointed come 2028. So again, Wes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I know there's a personal relationship there, but appreciate you taking the time and kind of, I know people are very interested in such a unique thing from a technology and cybersecurity standpoint, and appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, and thank you, Chris, for getting the word out. It's podcasts like this that help people understand what's out there from a cybersecurity perspective. So thank you.
The Up on Cyber podcast is presented by Oriento, the #1 combined CMMC managed service provider and authorized C3PAO. Oriento has been working closely with the CMMC stakeholders to establish the new standard since the beginning. Members of their board sat on committees with the creators of CMMC. They have 5 of the original provisional assessors on staff, and they have helped more than 400 DIB companies with their CMMC journey. Ariento is a leading B2B cybersecurity, information technology, and regulatory compliance service provider, comprised of a veteran team boasting decades of experience in assessments, audits, and operational cybersecurity, IT, and regulatory compliance at the highest levels of the United States military, federal government, and Fortune 500. With physical CMMC office locations in California, Tennessee, and the National Capital Region, they have and will continue to serve DIB companies across the United States and abroad.